major diplomatic development where the Kremlin has confirmed that Russia's President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump are expected to meet in the coming days. If confirmed, this would be the first summit between the two leaders since the year 2021. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov announced that the agreement came at the suggestion of the American side following talks between Putin and Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who was in Moscow to explore potential breakthroughs on the Ukraine war. Sources suggest that the UAE could host the summit as Putin is also scheduled to meet the Emirati president as well. The last high-level US-Russia summit took place in Geneva in 2021 when US President Joe Biden met Russian President Vladimir Putin. Since then, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 has sent bilateral relations into a deep freeze. While Trump has offered to mediate an end to the war, his public stance on Putin has fluctuated, sometimes praising, other times sharply criticizing the Russian president. Now, Yuri Ushakov said that during Wednesday's meeting, Witkoff even proposed a three-way summit between Trump, Putin, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The tone of the Putin-Witkoff meeting was described as businesslike and constructive, with both sides agreeing that US-Russia ties could follow a more positive, mutually beneficial path than what has been seen in the recent years. Now, meanwhile, in a parallel development, Russia's security chief Sergei Shoigu met India's national security advisor Ajit Doval, and Shoigu reaffirmed Russia's commitment to strengthening its strategic ties with India. Now, this meeting comes as Trump escalated tensions with India, announcing an additional 25% tariff, taking the total to 50%, citing continued import of Russian oil by India. And now we have Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, Professor, Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Sanjay Kumar, thank you for being with us. We also have Dr. Monish Turangbam, Senior Research Consultant at Chintan Research Foundation with us. Thank you, Dr. Monish, for being with us. Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, let me begin with you. This is what is happening today has gained, it was already very important, and now coming right after that double whammy of tariffs by US President Donald Trump, this meeting has gained so much significance. A lot will be discussed, and more importantly, this will really set the tone for that meeting between Trump and Putin.
Now, we have been expecting this meeting. There have been 4 phone calls between Trump and Putin in the last 5 months. So this is something, of course, the timing of the meeting is a surprise in the sense no one expected it to take place so soon and just after Witkoff's visit to Moscow. But one can have cautious optimism regarding this meeting because I still believe that Russia has entrenched position both on the ground, where it has occupied nearly 20% of the territory of Ukraine, 4 of the provinces. Whether Russians are willing to make any compromise on that, whether they are willing to withdraw from any of these, or whether Trump will be able to persuade Zelensky to somehow acknowledge the ground situation. These are some of the very difficult questions and moot points that will be, I'm very sure, discussed during this meeting. But in the next few days, in the preparatory talks, we believe some more details will come out, and some of the contours and parameters of the expected agreement, if any, we can hope to get.
Dr. Monish Thurangbam, cautious optimism is the word at this stage because the whole world is in a flux thanks to Trump's tariff tantrums day in, day out. But right now, this is an important moment for India. And you see what Prime Minister Modi said today, that India will not back down. India has to protect its farmers' interests, which means that it's not going to give in to US demands on agriculture front just to strike that trade deal. And in that sense, India's partnership with Russia gains huge significance in the context of things. Dr. Monish Thurangbam.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I think, again, taking off from Professor Pandey's comments on cautious optimism, I think this is also a time, it reflects a time, a very significant moment in terms of understanding the presidential style that comes out from the White House, that 24 hours and 48 hours are very long in American diplomacy right now, that the way things have shifted and swung from one end of the pendulum to another. And that brings me to the point that while we await with cautious optimism in terms of the different moot points that are going to be discussed, right from deals over critical minerals to battlefield gains that the Russians would want to maintain in Ukrainian territories, and also the possibility of a three-person summit, which has not been confirmed from one side. So I think there's a lot on the table. There's a lot at stake here. But my hunch is, or let's say just hope, that this meeting actually takes place, because in the next 24 hours and 48 hours, we do not know, what kind of advice or he listens to or doesn't listen to, and the kind of pull and pressures and pulls that is already happening in Washington D.C. in terms of the hawkish turn that Trump had adopted towards Putin, his own divisions with the MAGA base in the United States, who have never wanted United States to be really involved with the Europeans too much on the side of the Ukrainians. And then you have the deeper entrenched elements of US foreign policy making, which definitely wants Trump to take a more pro-Ukraine side and give a hard time to the Russians. So I think there's a lot of pull and pressures within the US administration also. And I just hope that this meeting really takes place, because I think it's really the need of the hour. There's too much of uncertainty. The messiness of multipolarity is really showing in world politics. And I think a Putin and Trump meeting, and let's say a positive arc developing out of that, will be a good news for India. It will give us some more traction in which we can balance our interests, and it will do good for both India-Russia relations and also India-US relations, which I think are equally important for India's growth.
Right, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, the question here at this stage is that it's very clear that for all the camaraderie, Trump is not about playing for friends. Trump is about playing for leverage, and in that sense, he's been mounting pressure on Russia. And once there is a better terms between Russia and the US, that can automatically have impact in the way Trump's tariff regime approaches India per se, isn't it?
Yes, very right. But then we should also understand that in the last few weeks, a month or more, Trump has become increasingly frustrated with Putin. And for the first time, we are seeing a Trump which is willing to take strong measures, put even stricter sanctions on Russia, and third-party sanctions also. The best scenario for India would be that this meeting takes place and something comes out of it. At least some of the pressure which we are facing now, 50% tariff and all, we hope that if there is a meeting and if there is even some movement towards an agreement, even if the final agreement is not signed in the first meeting itself, then that is likely to take some of the pressure off from countries like India. But then, as they say, the only thing about Trump, the only predictable thing about Trump is his unpredictability. So we really do not know much what will transpire, or whether at all this meeting will take place, and if at all it happens, then whether some positive movement can be seen. Although I still believe if the meeting actually takes place, both the leaders, I mean Trump and Putin, will try to ensure that at least there is some progress, some positive outcome, which they can show to their domestic audience and to the world at large.
Dr. Monish Turangbam, the two things that are going to happen before that all-important tariff deadline on India kicks in, that is on 27th is when that's meant to kick in. You have a major delegation from the US meeting in Indian delegation on the 25th of August. And now next week itself, the Trump-Putin meeting. So the next few weeks, well, have a lot to say about how the state of play is going to be as far as the global order is concerned, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, these negotiations are taking place at so many levels, basically two levels, right? Even in the case of US and Russia, there is the heart-north negotiation, diplomatic negotiation that's going to take place. And as Professor Pandey pointed out, there's also, selling the points to the domestic audience as well, which is equally important, I think, both for Putin and also for Trump as well, to his base voters and to the inner mechanizations of US foreign policy stakeholders within America. I think in the case of India as well, as we go through this acerbic comments from Trump, which is unprecedented, and hence that's why many people are saying that perhaps this is one of the lowest points in India-US bilateral relationship. But there are two levels to it where, again, hardcore diplomatic negotiations are going to take place, and by the end of August, there are a line of negotiations that are lined up. I think on the one hand, you have these negotiations. On the other hand, you have a domestic audience in India, which needs to hear firm points of protection of national interests, as Prime Minister Modi pointed out. I think what we might see is that India and US negotiation, when it takes place on the negotiation table, there are high chances that we might get into a stopgap measure or a pre-deal, which doesn't really give both the sides everything, but leaves enough space for concessions and compromise from both the sides, where the next steps can be taken forward from those. So I feel that, as you said, I feel that the next weeks are going to be very significant, not only for India-US relations or India-Russia relations, but also for how the world order is shaping up. And then you have, of course, the dragon watching from the sidelines. China is going to watch very keenly how US and how Russia talks pan out if they meet in real, and how also the Russia-India relationship and also the US-India negotiations take. So I think China is also a big factor in terms of how all this are going to play out.
Now, the other question here is that Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, we're always talking about what Trump has in mind, what India has in mind. What do you think Putin has in mind at this stage? Because the war is still going on. He's been always saying the fact that we've been ready for peace, we're ready to have conversations, but those negotiations have absolutely gone nowhere. And even this time around, a three-way meeting was suggested, a three-way meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, but that has ended up being another two-way meeting. So clearly, Putin is not, giving an inch when it comes to when or how he's, willing to end the war in Ukraine. And without that, the negotiations don't have a high likelihood of having a positive outcome, isn't it, Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey?
Yes. In fact, Putin has made two things very clear. One, that the fundamental problem, the fundamental issue has been NATO expansion and the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. He's very clear that that has to be kept in mind, and there should be no NATO expansion further, and Ukraine should not be allowed to join. The second thing he is very clear about is that the ground situation should be kept in mind. What he means is that the territories that Russians have occupied, they are not willing to vacate these territories. How will they justify to their own domestic audience and to his own people, what for has Russia sacrificed so much? I mean, thousands and thousands of Russian soldiers dying on the war front in order to somehow face save. The one thing that he needs to do is, he believes that to continue to occupy these territories. They have already been declared as Russian territories. So these are the two sticking points: Ukraine's NATO membership and the territories that Russia is currently occupying. Whether Putin is willing to compromise on those, I don't think, but we have to wait and watch.
Monish, Turangbam, tell us from India's perspective, when it is, viewing that meeting, when it's following that meeting between Trump and Putin, what should be, India's top expectations, and more importantly, what are the likely outcomes, that will be, positive for India, and more importantly, how does it, affect the way India engages with Russia?
I think, what happens between Russia and US, just following up from Professor Pandey's comment, what happens between Russia and US is beyond India's control, right? So I don't think there is much that India can do in terms of really shaping the contours of how these talks are going to take place. For one, I think this is going to be interesting given the NATO red lines, eastward expansion red lines that Professor Pandey spoke about. I think it's interesting that Trump, who started with very acerbic comments on NATO and even threatened to pull out America from NATO, has come a full circle in the recent NATO summit, where, because he was sort of placated by NATO members by agreeing to increase their defense spending to almost 5% in the next 10 years, there's almost a new sort of curve in US-NATO relationship under Putin. So we need to wait and watch, really, because I feel that what is really happening in America at this point of time, I feel, is that, the maverick Trump that we know about, who could sort of like pull out any rabbit from under the hat and sort of disrupt American foreign policy making, I think he's experiencing a little bit of the push and pull from the, established mechanizations of American foreign policy, which is hard on Russia, which has certain lines on NATO. So I think this is an interesting time also in American foreign policy, where the maverick president is sort of experiencing the hard pill in his own way of how to handle US foreign policy. Having said that, I think, yeah.
Right, Dr. Manish, as you're speaking, all I can think of is that famous Chinese saying or proverb, may you live in interesting times. Clearly, American foreign policy is living in very interesting times. But stay with us, both of you. We have some more news coming in as Trump is ramping up pressure on Russia and India with his tariff campaign. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has said that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is set to visit India soon. Ajit Doval, while announcing Putin's visit to India, said that India and Russia have a special, long-standing relationship and that we value this relationship. He said, we have had high-level engagement and these high-level engagements have contributed very substantially. Let's listen to what Ajit Doval had to say.
We are very excited and delighted to learn about the visit of His Excellency the President of Russia, President Putin, to India. I think that the dates are almost finalized now.
Now, the visit comes amidst heightened tensions between New Delhi and Washington over India's trade relations with Russia. Trump has accused India of aiding Moscow's war on Ukraine by buying Russian energy, derailing trade talks between India and the US. And as we all know, Trump has signed a new executive order imposing the additional 25% tariff on imports from India over the same issue, the continued purchase of Russian oil by India. Trump has also threatened to hit buyers of Russian oil with secondary tariffs unless Russia agrees to pause the war in Ukraine, which is now in its 4th year. Dr. Sanjay Kumar Pandey, this is a big announcement coming in. India's National Security Advisor in Russia, having high-level meetings, and in the course of which he himself announces that Putin is set to visit India and that the dates are almost finalized. And, we would not be surprised if all that entire idea came, during NSA's visit to Russia, isn't it?
Yes, you are very right. In fact, we should also see this in the background of between 2021 and 2023-24, these bilateral visits, summit meetings between Russia and India were not really taking place. One reason or pretext was the COVID. But then since last year, we have again brought them on rail. So there is a forward movement on India-Russia ties. It seemed for some time that these ties are losing momentum. But after the start of the Ukraine war, and especially since India started buying huge amounts of Russian oil, for the last 3 years, Russia has become our top oil exporter. We are importing maximum amount from Russia. So our bilateral trade has also crossed $60 billion. It is a 6-time jump over 2021. So India-Russia ties are moving in the positive direction, and especially in the wake of downturn in India-US ties and the tariff war and this 50% tariff. It is believed that both India and Russia are rediscovering each other and re-emphasizing this partnership, and also trying to ward off some of the pressure that they feel from US. Incidentally, India's ties with China has also seen some improvement. The RIC, Russia, India, China trilateral framework, which again was not talked about for some time, it seems that has also been revived. So these are some of the ways in which the three countries, all the three facing pressure from US, are trying to show solidarity. Whether that solidarity will go any distance, that is something we have to wait and watch.
Right, fair enough, Dr. Monish Turangbam. I'll take some final comments in from you. It's all seems like the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. First, Putin comes to India, and then the American delegation comes to India, and then you have the deadline for the 50% tariff. All of it, it's all building up towards reinvigorated ties, ideally speaking, in terms of both India-US ties, India-Russia ties, and Russia-US ties as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we are seeing a very interesting set of permutations and combinations playing out in front of us. Talking about Putin's dates for visit, there's also a Quad summit coming up in India, whereby if things go well and if there is a mini trade deal, Mr. Trump is expected to be in Delhi. At least we expect that now. So this Quad summit is going to be very interesting in terms of both the omissions and commissions of the Quad summit. Also, to put it on record, I think if we just look at the joint statement that Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump pulled out in February, just after his inauguration in the White House, it's just a cursory examination of that joint statement tells us the level of depth and width of the India-US relationship, the kind of institutional linkages that have been built between these two countries over the last 20 years or so. So I think the fundamentals are very strong in India-US relationship. It has to be seen whether the kind of disruptions that the tariff announcements and other such things like displeasure with India's BRICS membership, or the kind of downturns that are being seen in India-US-Russia relationship having a knock-on effect on India-US relationship. Whether these are temporary, do they have the ammunition to really do real damage on the body politic of the India-US relationship? We have to wait and watch. But I think I would rather go with a little bit of optimism that the structures that we have built up in the last 20 years are pretty strong. And I think it's going to weather the storm that we are seeing right now.
we're
And it's a
really
testing, one of the most testing times for the practice of autonomy that we pride ourselves on.